Good morning. It's Carol again. Welcome to Carol's Books and Story Time. Now, this time I have a story for you, which was about my grandfather, who, when he was a young man, was involved in the First World War. He used to take the horses to the front line, and these horses would be pulling the guns, and then he'd bring the bodies back. So he used to go along a track called Bomb Alley, and he had a lot of dangers to face. Well, this is a story about one of the days that he faced when he was in the Great War. And I've called it We Shall Not Forget. The acrid smoke of battle hung on the April air. The guns rapped out a steady rhythm, and the whine of shells followed by explosion as the young soldier swung himself into the saddle of his commanding officer's horse, and leading another horse by the reins, set off for the makeshift blacksmith's forge, where he was stationed, reshoeing the army horses, with the burly blacksmith to whom he was attached. It was important that the horses were kept shoed and ready for battle. They were needed to drag the guns into position and carry the commanding officers into the thick of the battle ahead of their troops. As he rode, he puzzled over this war in which he found himself. He was only 15 years of age, and by rights should have been at home in Yorkshire, working out his apprenticeship to the local village blacksmith. It should all have been very simple, this war, and been over long ago. But the enemy had weapons never before seen in any conflict, and it dragged on, weary month after weary month after weary month. He remembered setting off from home feeling very brave. He had lied about his age, giving a false date of birth. It had all seemed such an adventure at the time, but now he faced the reality of the trenches, the mud, the wet, and the poor rations. He'd seen men knock-kneed and bent double, limping onwards down the muddy roads, bootless and on bloodied feet, marching half asleep, half blind with exhaustion, deaf to the whine of the gas shells exploding before and after and beside them. He had seen men fumbling with gas masks, struggling to cover their faces from the thick, green, choking smoke of the exploding nerve gas shells. Yes, he had seen many a young face drop, heard the blood gurgling from the damaged lungs, and seen the white eyes of his fellow soldiers writhing in their sockets, and he had carried their bodies home on the gun carriages. He had heard of the needless loss of life as the commanding officers had ordered their men to leave the safety of their trenches and go over the top. This was not war, it was massacre. Too late he heard the whine of a shell. His horse reared, whinnying in fright. Ernest felt himself falling, and the heavy weight of his horse rolled on top of him as the shell exploded. He remembered no more until he regained consciousness in a field hospital. This Sunday, Queen Elizabeth II of England will lead the nation's act of remembrance for the lives lost in 2 world wars and other conflicts at the cenotaph in Whitehall. Wreaths of red poppies will be laid there and at the grave of the unknown soldier in Westminster Abbey. And up and down this country and all over the Commonwealth, there will be similar ceremonies of remembrance. But still we have conflict in many parts of the world. At the end of the First World War, mothers, sisters and widows of men killed banded together and formed the Women's Cooperative Guild. They were afraid that this war to end all wars in which their men had died would be followed by even greater conflicts. So in 1933, as well as the red poppies for remembrance, they made white poppies for peace. The white poppy was a reminder of the horrors of war. People who wore them were indicating to those in power that they should resist war and find a way to resolve conflict without violence and with justice. But since that great war to end all wars, there have been 300 other conflicts, and over 100 million people have been slaughtered. Governments have failed to prevent war. This year, as once again war threatens to engulf our planet in a worldwide conflict, the poppy is again on sale and has become a symbol for peace. People do not want war. Leaflets proclaim that the start of the new century is the time to build a culture of peace. It's the time to abolish war. It's the time to put in place well-tried methods of conflict prevention. The poppy on sale reminds us of our failure to prevent war, but it can also be a symbol of our determination to try and build a culture of peace, both in our homes, schools, colleges, universities, and places of work. Our interaction with others in all aspects of our lives and in our countries at all levels of government. A well-known teacher and philosopher once declared that the peacemakers were blessed because they would inherit a peaceful earth. As you remember the 100 million slaughtered in needless conflicts around the world, wear your poppy with pride and resolve that the young men of the future will not have to face the horrors my grandfather faced in the Great War. So as we come into Remembrance Weekend, just think about that and remember the history behind all the cenotaphs and behind all the graves in the war cemeteries. There were young people that died, young men who never ever grew up. Okay, so with that somber thought, I will say goodbye.